Happy Thursday morning, everyone. I hope this finds you well and living your very best life in Jesus Christ. Landry became pretty annoyed with Nana the other day when she asked him for a school assignment what he wanted to be when he grows up. I kind of understood that. We ask kids that all the time. And even though he answered her, I don't really remember what he said other than he had this exasperated sigh. When I got him alone later and I asked him why he got annoyed, he said indignantly, "Because I am grown up. I am not a baby." I can identify. When I was a child, of course I was much older than Landry, I believe, I remember reacting with that same annoyance when adults ask me, in a very condescending tone, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I don't remember the age, but I remember thinking the same thing Landry said. But I am grown up. Of course, the truth is that even though kids see themselves that way, we adults know how much growing, both physically, mentally, and emotionally, they still have to do. And as much as we adults think we are grown up at various stages of our lives, we find ourselves to be still immature in many ways. Sometimes that requires the gift of hindsight, and sometimes it requires us to intentionally find these childish attitudes and ways of thinking and make a conscious effort to grow out of them to become more mature in the way we think and speak and act. How many of us, if we were honest, can look back at things we did, say 10 years more ago and say, "Wow, that was childish. That was really immature. I'm really glad I grew out of that." And truth be told, no matter what our age, we all have a lot of mental, emotional, and spiritual growing to do. In my case, it took me decades to recognize my childish thinking patterns, and a lot of them have persisted into adulthood. I have described in previous devotionals some of these things, and I'm not going to recap them now, but looking back, I had totally wrong ideas about God, others, and myself. Until I had addressed my immature thinking, my spiritual growth was going nowhere. I was still a child. The Bible gives us a vivid example of believers trapped in childish thinking. When the Apostle Paul began ministering to the church at Corinth, I guess he'd probably called them his problem children, he faced this challenge. See, the Corinthians could only handle simple truths instead of meaty teachings, and that frustrated Paul. Due to their childish self-focus, Paul constantly had to review basics with them. He emphasized how they needed to view God, others, and themselves in the correct way. In 1 Corinthians, he wrote how the church was squabbling over small matters when big issues were really at stake. And he follows this with a well-known passage on the mature qualities of true love. Then he re-emphasized the basic truth he wanted them to understand, and it goes like this. "When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put away childish things." That's 1 Corinthians 13:11. Do you ever remember your parents saying to you in a moment of frustration, or maybe you said it, "It's time for you to just grow up"? Can't you just kind of hear that tone in Paul's writings? As an adult, we certainly have the ability to choose to mature in our thoughts and attitudes, but truth be told, some people just choose not to. We have a choice to be like the Corinthians and settle for childish thinking, or move on to more mature thinking. In my case, I had a lot of growing to do in many areas, and I'm sure I still do. But I had to overcome my childish view of God as a harsh punisher, or sometimes as a cosmic Santa Claus. By studying the Bible and working to draw closer to Him and His will, I learned how loving and patient and kind He was. As my faith has matured, my friendship with God has grown by leaps and bounds. I've also had to mature in the ways I viewed myself. I'm still working on that. My inner critic no longer, however, sits on my mind's throne, pronouncing judgment over real and perceived failure. When Jesus took the throne of my thought life, He reigned over my mind with truth and peace. If you're like me and have struggled with speaking, thinking, and reasoning like a selfish child, There's really only one solution, and that's Christ. Jesus is the one who helps us take thoughts captive and imagine which ones, or excuse me, not imagine, but examine which ones need maturing. Then, as we learn to submit to God's loving authority in our lives, He transforms our hearts and minds to be more like His. You know, if someone were to ask me that same question that Nancy asked the other day, that age-old question from our youth, if they wanted to know, what do you want to be when you grow up? I know what I'd answer today. I want to grow up to be just like Jesus. I hope you make today a fantastic day. I want you to know that I'm here should you need me, and I love you all.